And so God blessed Solomon with wisdom that was incredible. And then Solomon didn't ask for riches and honor, but God blessed him with that when he was serving God faithfully. God calls us to seek his wisdom. And when we seek his wisdom, God blesses us. Okay, this is another one of those, don't lose track of this thought. When we seek God's wisdom, he will provide. When we seek God's wisdom, when we seek direction from him, he will give it. And his wisdom, his counsel will be what is best. It will be exactly what we need. That's what God will give us. He's not going to give us something we don't need. And we see that in the life of Saul. Unfortunately, what we see with Saul is that he turned away from God. And we know how that came out. So this quarter, all right, this worked really good a moment ago. Hey, Jim, you know what to do?
No, the Bible class downstairs wasn't working, so they
Okay. And we don't have Matt here. Where's Chris Huff and Ben McCall? Are you here? Anybody who knows how to fix that? Because I don't. I can put it in, but I can't make it go. Oh man, you're a genius. So he pushes one button, now he's a genius. I don't know. Thanks, Jimmy. Don't go anywhere. So this quarter here, we've started a new book. So if you've not received your new book yet, see Jake or Kyle, they can help you and set you up with a new book. And it's going to cover all of the divided kingdom. And this covers quite a period of time. We get into this divided kingdom here. And we've just finished talking about the fall of Solomon. The point we talked about a moment ago, doesn't matter who the king is, David, a man after God's own heart, still cannot rule as God rules. We saw some of the difficulties and problems that David dealt with. You know, that the point that I'm hoping that we'll start to see is that for one to truly occupy the seat of David, because ultimately that's where we're going. It's going to be Jesus who sits in the seat of David. Doesn't matter how good the king is along the way, he cannot fully occupy the seat of the seat of David, because he's a man, and there are limitations to even what a good man can do to rule the people of God. And so all of this here, step by step, piece by piece, is leading us to Christ. Eventually, we will come to that point in time where it is Christ that we see, who is sitting at the right hand of God, reigning from heaven above. He is the only one who can rule perfectly. He's the only one who has the power to do that. He's the only one who has the character to do that. And so what we see now over and over again is the inability of man to rule the people of God. We've been introduced to that already. Wait.
I would just like to say I'm terrible about the Old Testament. I really am.
And that's why we're doing this class.
And I'm very excited about it because of the divided kingdom and all like that. It's really, put the words in my mouth.
Hard.
I don't know.
It's hard and somewhat tedious. I mean, I'll be honest, it's like there's some other classes I would prefer to teach. Okay? But now at the same time, it's like there's this part of me that wishes everybody were in this class. Because it's like a lot of, you're not alone, Wade, where people say, I really don't get the Old Testament. Or there's this period of time I don't understand the Old Testament. Most of the time it's because we've not studied it. Because we come to it and we go like, well, let's not do that part. Let's go do this other part's more exciting over here. But even those parts that are more exciting over here, we only have this much knowledge in it because we don't understand what it means in the big picture.
Well, a lot of the Old Testament that we find exciting is politics.
know all of the big stories,
Yeah, exactly.
but we don't know how they're all tied together.
Everything kind of comes together for the final picture.
Yes. But the final picture will mean so much more when we understand all of the steps that were taken to get us there.
That's what
And see, I think that's the beauty of doing a study like this, where we can understand the big picture is going to be much bigger. In fact, we're already seeing the big picture. I mean, sometimes we're talking now about, look at where this is going to go. We're already putting those pieces together.
Where's this thing lead to?
That's the whole idea of studying this part of it. That's the whole idea.
I heard a saying, I don't know, it was maybe a year or so ago, but it helped me. It said, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed.
Absolutely.
And that, it just, because it's all a cycle.
It
And
is.
So when we understand the old, then we can tie it to the new and vice versa.
Right, that's right. And there's things that you study about and read about in the New Testament that, yes, we can have some understanding of what that's about. But we don't get the big picture of it. We don't understand the depth of some things that are said in the epistles without understanding the Jewish law and how the Jews lived. We can go through the book of Revelation and we can learn some things from Revelation, but if we don't know Daniel and Ezekiel, let me tell you something, we're not getting all of Revelation. You know. If we don't understand God's revelation to his people throughout the ages, revelation, we can learn something there, but we're not going to get the whole thing. There's a reason why the Revelation is the last book in the Bible. God put it there for a reason. And it summarizes a whole lot of what has happened. God has a purpose for the way he's put some things together.
As we study about the divided kingdom here at this time in history, I go back and I think about the various periods of time, the time before Moses, if you will, where the people kind of went separate ways and God saved only Moses. Then after Moses was saved, the people were divided again, if you will, when they came out of the ark. And God,
We're with you, Wayne.
So after the flood, people were divided, and God chose descendants of Israel. Now we see the descendants of Israel divided. And you look at that, and I think often of the prayer that Christ made in the garden before he was crucified, praying that his followers be united.
Mm-hmm.
People who claim Christ today are not united.
That's right.
So we are divided again, even today.
Yeah.
So what do you make of the fact that it's divided before Noah, divided with Israel, and it's divided?
What I make of that is, here's the nature of man.
Yeah.
Here's the nature of man. And the only way that we find that there's times where people are united is when they are united in God. When we see that with the children of Israel. There are highs and lows. Seems like a lot more lows than highs. But at times when things are going well, it's because they are united in their service to God. They are worshiping God as he wants them to worship. They are remembering him. They are honoring him. And they are united. And they are blessed. But we see most of the time where they are not united, because they are not following the law of God. They are not listening to the Levitical priesthood as they would have then. They are not doing the things God would have them do. What else could they be but ununited? I made up a word there. See, they cannot be united if they are not focused on God. And I think that's one of the points that I want us to come away with and understanding that. Let's look at this, Wayne. Good segue here to the next couple of points here. When we think about the study of the divided kingdom, it's a study of the blessings of obedience and the curse of sin. In the big picture, that's what it's really about right there. And so we ask the questions like him, and we've been talking about this already, like, why are we studying this? You know, and what does this even have to do with us? I mean, I hear people say that sometimes in the Old Testament as a whole, but particularly like Leviticus. I really enjoyed Leviticus. Well, it was pretty hard, wasn't it? And yet, are there applications that we come away with from Leviticus? Like, I am holy. Be holy as I am holy, God says. I mean, that's the whole theme of Leviticus. Do we make application to this? Is that important to us today? The Apostle Peter thought so. Well, Jesus thought so because he spoke about that. The Apostle Peter talked about that. So it's the applications of the Old Testament is what I'm talking about. And when you look in the divided kingdom, like, what does this have to do with us? I mean, what's the purpose of us studying this? It's just a painful cycle to see. The up and the down, mostly down. You know, it's like when we read this cycle time and time again, why do we have to read this? God has put it here for a reason. It's just like the Judges. I confess to you that the period of the Judges is not my favorite. It's like every time you start a new story, you already know how it's going to end. It's like watching a Hallmark movie. You already know how it's going to end. The boy's going to kiss the girl and they're going to live happily ever after. All right? And you're reading the Judges, you start into a new story. You already know what's going to happen. Why does God put it there? And why does God expect us to read that? Because we need to see what happens over and over and over again. It's a little bit like that to me in the divided kingdom. I mean, I think the storyline is a little broader, but there's some similar points there for us, I think.
Divided kingdom, Judah stayed more true to following God, and it just happens that Jesus is from the line of Judah, so there seems like a straight string through that.
Judah, we'll see, Judah holds on a little bit longer. And they actually have some kings who come along that God would call good kings. Israel has no good kings during their time. But even Judah falls too, which as well becomes a part of the purpose and the story. Because they were not fully aligned with God. There were bright moments that came along that we will see and make some applications from here. But I hope that, have you ever heard somebody say, what does this mean to you and me? All right? I mean, it's like we've got to make applications. And I want us to be able to make applications as we go through this period of time. The first and second Kings emphasizes the events of Israel a little bit more. Second Chronicles emphasizes the events of Judah a little bit more, though they're both on both sides. On our reading schedule, that Kyle published, we're having a hard time trying to figure out what scriptures to put in because it gets very confusing. And I had suggested to him, I had a list. I said, just put all these First Kings passages in there. I'm second guessing myself on that some now. And in fact, I may try to update that and put some Second Chronicle passages in where appropriate as well. Okay? But it's not going to look very pretty. Okay? It's going to just really mess up the syllabus, all right? But there are times where we need to read the Second Chronicles storyline to get the bigger picture. Okay? But all in all, it's going to be kind of the same type reading we've done before. For a class, we're going to have 1, 2, or 3 chapters to read for a class. Some may be here and some of them may be here, is how that will work out. Again, I'm trying to get some of this big picture stuff in our mind again. God's appeal for Israel to return to him is what we see repeatedly during this study. And we'll see how God utilizes the prophets, his spokesmen, his messengers, to go to Israel. I'm saying Israel in the big sense. I mean Judah as well. To go to the children of Israel and speak to them to try to draw them back. in this quarter and next quarter more so, we will take some time to study the minor prophets as they fall in place during this storyline. You know, there's something else, Wade, that we don't study a lot. It is the minor prophets, right? And those are going to come up more in next quarter, but it starts in this quarter. And what's interesting is we're going to study them about the time they were written and to whom they were writing. And it'll fit right in a nice way. Because sometimes we look at the storyline, you know, what is Habakkuk and Nahum? Who is that? Why did he say these things? Because the minor prophets are way over here, you know, but they happen here. That's when they're written. And so let's read them when it happens. And the minor prophets are going to make a whole lot more sense to us when we look at it that way. And so that's part of that's going to be happening here. But here are some things. Here are some things I want us to think about for a moment, okay? You know, points of emphasis. Do we get the emphasis part? Points of emphasis here. When we look at this quarter and what we're doing in the divided kingdom, what we're trying to study, you know, when we stray from God, there is a way back to Him. We can always make our way back to God. That is the repeated storyline throughout the divided kingdom. I do not think we can emphasize this enough. And you talk about something to go on your note sheet for the kids' classes, is that there is always a way back to God. We do not determine the road back to God. He has the road now. We just have to follow it. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about the period of the divided kingdom or if we are talking about disciples of Jesus today. The principle is the same. That when we find ourselves far removed from God, and let's just be very honest, all of us find ourselves there sometimes. That there is a way back to God, but we are not the ones to determine how to get there. God tells us where we need to be and how to get there. And I just don't think we can emphasize that too much. And that's what we'll see in this study. God's mercy and grace are clear. I've said this before in our class. I sometimes don't even know how to respond calmly when people say, well, the New Testament is all about God's grace and mercy. And the Old Testament is just about law. No! I cannot scream this loud enough. The Old Testament is full of God's grace and mercy. Throughout the whole Old Testament is God's grace and mercy. And I want so very much, as we go through the divided kingdom, for that to be something that just stands out in a very powerful way. Because God's character today is no different than it was in the days of the kings.
I agree, brother.
His character is the same.
I agree.
And I want us to see that. Okay? Points of emphasis. Israel sinned and is undeserving of God's favor. We are no different. Israel sinned and was undeserving of God's favor. And yet, we see God reach out time and time again. God's grace and mercy. And so there's this part of this time, the period of the kings, that I think is so incredibly beautiful. So I said some things a few minutes ago. It sounds like, yeah, I'm not looking forward to this study too much. Okay. I mean, the storyline, the repeated thing. Oh, man. On the other hand, I want to say, The repeated storyline of God reaching out to his people over and over again is the most incredible thing we can read. And I want that to stand out to us. I want our children to understand that. That God is reaching out for us. And we can come to him. He's the one with the roadmap. He's the one with the plan. He is the one that tells us what we must do to have a relationship with him. It is not the other way around. But when we submit to him, he is there for us time and again.
When you just done 2 bulletin boards that would last the whole quarter when I was a roadmap.
Oh.
And the first one was the throne. And I've been kind of looking at this. I don't think in the throne, you could do, of course, the divided kingdom, but then the throne on which Jesus is sitting,
Okay, yes.
bringing in the New Testament,
Yep.
and the throne that was always that of God is an active, and I think,
Yes.
you know, these, as we go through the divided kingdom, you see how they actively did good or bad against what is actively
Right.
done today for us through the eternal throne, and you can make it very visual. You can start in 4 and 5-year-olds and just get a little
Good.
bit more.
I love that. The fact that the children of Israel turned away from God time and again says nothing to diminish God's place and purpose and consistency all the way through. I think that applies in the Christian era as well, as disciples of Jesus. When we find ourselves far removed from God, let's remember God is not moved. He's still there. The problem is we have moved away from him. Is that any different in the period of the kings? No. Is that any different from the period of the judges? No. I need consistency. Okay? And with regard to a relationship with God, it's all about that consistency. We are the ones that are inconsistent. God is the one who is always there. God is the one who is always willing to offer grace and mercy. God is the one who is always there. And this is what we see over and over and over again. Lydia.
When I read the Old Testament, for people who say that it was just about law and they don't see grace and mercy, I think about, like, if you have a couple and the wife constantly cheats on her husband and waiting for her to come back, and she comes back and he showers her with it. Then a few months later it happens again. His friends would be like, why are you taking her back? She keeps doing this and he doesn't love her. We have an agreement, and that's kind of how I see God in this area.
There's a prophet that saw God just that way too. And he will come up in our study. I love your point. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And God's going to demonstrate that through one of the prophets that we'll talk about. Okay. Are we getting the bigger picture here? And why we're studying this long period of time, in Scripture. I say long period. It's not the longest period of time in Scripture, but there's a lot given to it. There's a lot to read in that period of time. Joe?
I think another thing that stands out is we can't take for granted generational faithfulness.
Oh.
Because so much it becomes
Yeah.
apparent that you'll have a generation that stays true to God, and the next generation will
Sure.
as well. And so just paying attention to that and where was the breakdown in those generations.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Generational faith. We use such a term. Because we see how many times that there's a generation that's faithful to God, and then the next generation is not. Sometimes we can understand, we can rationalize because we see that they were faithful to God, but they weren't training and teaching their children to be faithful. So sometimes we see that, like even with like priests like Eli. Eli didn't train his children well. Wow, look what happened to them. It didn't work out too good. Sometimes we just don't understand what happened from one generation to the next. And we talked about this a quarter ago or so, just about parents, grandparents. Here we have this opportunity of trying to teach our children so that the next generation might be more faithful than us. That would be what we want. In the big picture of what we're looking at, God's message is clear. That he demands his will to be heard and obeyed. And in our youth classes, point of emphasis again, time after time, God expects his word to be heard and obeyed. Then we have a relationship with God, Barry.
Some of the stories in the Bible, like you talked about, ways alluding to, can be monotonous. But the message of God is consistent.
Yes.
From the old to the new.
It is.
And I think we overlook sometimes that Peter, Paul, John, Philip, all converted people to Christ by using scripture from the Old
That's right.
The message is there.
Yes, exactly right. We study the epistles, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, particularly the Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians. There are some things there that we just don't understand well if we don't understand the relationship with God to the Jewish people in the Old Testament. We can still learn, so we can still take some things away. But there are some things that we just don't understand if we don't know the Old Testament story. We don't know the Old Testament story. Those books take on increased meaning. They do. They very much will do that. So, applications again. There are many applications from this period of time that are very rich and practical, and I sure hope that we'll be able to talk about that some as we go through. Quickly here, our time is going to be gone. Just understanding where we are in our storyline as we're getting into our storyline. Israel is coming out of a time where it was rich. There was a lot of everything. Nobody was hungry. Silver was almost worthless because there was so much of it. Did I say something about riches? that's hard to even understand. But, here, the size of Israel in the days of Solomon had grown and increased. You still primarily have Israel living here among the 12 tribes. But all the nations around are subject to Israel, and are conquered. Some of these nations that were ugly to Israel when they were coming in to conquer the land, are now controlled by Israel. This whole region. Even all the way up here, they don't necessarily control all of this land up here, but all of the Euphrates River, all of this region here is paying tribute or tax to Israel, still under their control. And that's just amazing. All the way down to the Red Sea down here, the Aqaba, all the way down here. Boy, is that going to change fast as we get into this next period of time. These kings down here, boy, they're going to rise up quickly. All the way from Egypt down here, they're going to rise up quickly and are going to consume a lot of this land that had been conquered. And Israel's going to be down to its 12 tribes. Oh, but now they're split 10 and 2, and they don't have as much strength and power, and their enemies are going to be just chiseling away at the promised land given by God. That's what's going to happen. And man, is that going to happen fast. That's going to take place. It does. You know what? It's the same way Satan chisels away at our heart. Just a little bit, a piece at a time. And it changes us. And we're going to see such a change in Israel, in their placement, their position before God. And it's going to happen fast. Those influences from around them on the outside. We didn't cover today everything that was in our book for this first lesson. Didn't really think we would. Didn't intend to. Because in our next lesson, we're going to be talking about Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And, well, actually, there was a sermon a couple of weeks ago, if you were here, about some things that happened with the first king of Israel and his desire to build a golden calf in Dan and in Bethel. I'm not going to spend 30 minutes on that in class because we just talked about that. It was kind of a long sermon, as I've heard. But, hopefully we've covered that pretty well. So Wednesday night, God willing, I'll take up from here and kind of work through those first couple of stories of our story. I hope you'll be ready for that. So glad you're here today.